Well, hello and good evening. This video is about building this trumpeter model of an Israeli Ti-67 tank. It's one in a few videos I'm going to try and do just to explain this conversion from a 35th scale tank to add radio control to the tank. So just a few general words. I've been at this, most days I do a little something on it. I've been at it about 6 weeks. And just generally to show you where I'm at, the tank has been fully put together and is fully functional. I haven't put any of the detailed parts on it. I've basically done the wheels and a working suspension. And other than that, I put a radio in it. And pretty much the radio is the same one as used as in 16th scale hang long tanks. It's the 7.0 radio. I put it in because one board does everything. There's not multiple boards. And also it's full function. You get headlights, taillights, cannon flash, machine gun. Good control. I like the radio. You can program the volume from the transmitter. There's a lot going for the radio. What I want to focus on this video is the wiring. I'm interested in cleaning up some wires here and see if I can show a little bit of this up close. I really find I need a camera stand that I can. Right now I have to just hold the camera to show the tank in detail. But basically this is the hang-long board. There's a battery, 6-cell nickel metal hydride battery that I fit on top of the board. It goes in here. Everything's a very tight fit. This pinion gear mates with a pinion gear on the back of the turret. That gear is there. Those are all 3D printed parts. When you do a static model, you don't get any of the mechanism for gun elevation or the turret rotation, so you have to figure that out yourself. For me, what really helped was buying a 3D printer where I could print up some parts. I could printed the gears. I don't know how I would have bought exactly the gears that I needed to fit this case. They're certainly not standard. The machine gun, you can see the machine gun where that wire terminates. Right there is where the machine gun is through that port with a little connector on it. These wires right here, they are very small. They come through, and one of these is for the machine gun. The yellow is for machine gun, the blue is for the cannon flash, and this slightly larger one connects to that connector which drives the motor, which you see is just there's a simple lever that pushes down on the extension to the camera to make it go up and down. And there's also a tiny little spring in here, which might be hard to show, but I need it to, so the spring is right. Well, you can barely see it there, but it's pushing down on the actually it's pulling up on the end of the cannon. So basically the wiring in the turret is just for the motor and 2 LEDs, the cannon and the machine gun. And those wires actually have to come up through this tube here because the turret has to rotate, so you need some kind of a service loop so that so the wires don't get all tangled up. And this little tube, plus the fact that those wires are so small, I can turn the turret maybe 10 times around, and as long as I turn it 10 times back, everything is fine. the wiring in this tank, there are 18 wires that run in this tank. So 4 of them, 2 each for the drive motors, and they're here. So these are 2 drive motor wires coming from the board. Of course, so let's show this. You need to resolder wires to the board. The blue wires are the motor drives left and right, and the red-white wire is the battery. So actually that's 4 wires plus 2 to the battery, 6 wires. I said 18 wires. I think there's 20 wires. So the rest of them are, there are 4 LEDs, headlights, taillights, cannon flash, and machine gun. So that's going to be 8 more wires. And then there's 2 more motors, and that's 8 more wires. There's turret rotation, and there's gun elevations. That's 8 more wires. That's 16 wires. There's a switch, which is 2, and there's a battery cable, which is 2, so that's 4 more. So it's 20 wires. It's a lot of wires. You can see some of the wires. These are both for tail lights and for headlights. The headlights go to these solder tabs, and the solder tabs, actually this is the one place where I don't have a connector that plugs in. Rather, there are solder tabs on, they're right here, if I can show it, right there. And they, when you put the deck on, so the deck goes on, it slips in. It slips in this way. And right back here, those 2 tabs make contact when you set the deck on. So in the process of setting the deck on, you make the contacts to the headlights. And the tail lights are mounted in the tank, on the back of the tank. So basically the tail lights are in here, like right there, and the other side are the tail lights. Very bright when you turn the tank on. I've already shown that in another video. I've shown the tank running. So the main thing on this video I wanted to do was I wanted to show how the tank comes apart and some of the wiring. So a lot of the wiring is under this board. So the wiring for the turret, everything in the turret is coming up through this opening into the turret right there. So all the LED wires are off of the forward part of the board right through here. There are connectors on them all, and they run underneath the board. And then along one side of the board, I think it's this side of the board, are wires, and there are connectors on them that are for the turret motor and then run to the turret elevation motor. And also there's a speaker, that's 2 more wires. Now we're at 22 wires that connect from one point to another. So those run underneath what I'm calling the spacer. This gray part right here that's holding the speaker is this, I'm calling it this a spacer. It positions everything. It holds the turret motor. It positions the board. It spaces the motors apart. Without that, the motors tend to curve in a little bit, and the sprockets aren't square to the world. So there's wires that have to run under the spacer and back to the taillights, and under this spacer and to these tabs to power the headlights. A lot of wires. So it's become a little bit of something I don't want to do very often, to remove the spacer. I'd rather basically, once everything's working, to leave it alone and not touch it. And the reason that I'm doing all this is, one, I want to make it a little easier to charge the battery, because to charge the battery I got to take the deck off so far. But the spacer that I'm working on has ports on it right here and here. They come out the bottom of the spacer. They are these lines that run down here. Basically, I can put a servo connector in there, and basically I drill mating holes in the bottom of the tank. It'll give me access to the plus and minus of the battery. And that's the reason for putting this new spacer in. I'm going to need something that protects the circuit board from reverse current when I charge the battery, and I haven't totally worked that out. I think I will be using a Schottky diode. What I read on the internet is that's an approach to protecting a circuit card against reverse voltage. But for now, I also want to make the batteries just easier to get to if I have to disconnect the battery manually. And that's taken me into the wiring. So I thought I'd take the opportunity, because I intend to take the spacer off, to show some of the wiring. So let's see if I can do that. First thing I'm going to need to do is set this back up on the stand, on the camera stand. Okay, so now I don't have is up front of view, so I'll need to pick the camera up, or I'll need to take this to the camera. That probably might work just as well. We'll see. But to take the spacer out, I put one screw in the bottom of the spacer. So basically this is the new spacer, which has the details for in situ charging and also cleaning up these blue wires so they're not so visible. So those blue wires basically are what I'd like to just clean up. I'd like to just run them along the sides instead of over the top of the speaker. So I'm going to turn the tank upside down, and it may be difficult to see. I guess it's worth maybe moving this closer in here. Okay, so the bottom of the tank, you see the turret motor, the on-off switch, and right here is that one screw that holds the spacer. So I'm going to remove that screw. These are odd 80 screws. They fit nicely and they work, but they're small. Okay. I need to set this back up here. Okay. Now I'm not sure if the spacer's just going to try and fall out on me. Okay, so the spacer's loose, the board is loose. I have not removed the spacer and the board since I did the headlight and taillight wiring, and that could be make things difficult because it ties everything together more than I would like. I cannot take the motor drives out at all very easily, and so I may have things somewhat tied down where I can't even do this, but I'm going to try. And if nothing else, what I'm hoping I can do is show some of the wiring. Well, so what I can see is that what I've done on the okay. So I can see I've got some work to do here. There's all the wires running underneath the board. And you can see wires coming off of here. There are all these really tiny little wires coming off of here. They're on connectors, and I'm probably going to need to take the connectors off to deal with this, and I hate to, but those are for the lights. This connector right here, I believe, is for the switch, and these two connectors along the sides right here, those two are turret elevation and turret turning. I went to great lengths to take the servo connectors and try and make them shorten them so they were no longer than the pins on the header. And if you take a standard servo connector and you connect it, you'll see it's a lot longer than the header pins. But the board won't fit if you don't shorten it to essentially the same length as the header pin. So that's one of the things you need to do to fit the hang-long board in a 35th scale tank. And those tiny little wires there are just miserable to work with, but there's no other way to get things fit. And I believe these really tiny little wires on the back of that I've used to wire up the headlights and taillights, they're preventing me from removing the spacer. And the job is to replace the spacer. So now that I see that basically, as I feared, everything is tied together and I don't have connectors where I can take it apart very easily, I'm going to just stop here, and I hope that that I've shown a little bit of the wiring in the tank. When I did the wiring, I had the spacer out of the tank and the board out of the tank, and I was able to do all the wiring with the spacer and the board out of the tank, and then I put them both in together. And all I needed to do was route the motor wires. But then, with everything in the tank, I soldered in those tiny white little wires, the ones you kind of see here, to do the headlights and taillights. And now I've made it so the spacer won't come out. So I got to do something about that. And what I'm hoping is that I've shown just a little bit about the wiring. I'm still working on trying to make it as easy to work with as possible. The fact is, it's not very easy to work with. And I think, when I finalized it, all these parts will be in the tank. Even if I need to take the battery out, that'll be far less difficult than what I'm just showing here. I'm making it look horrible, which it is right now. If I can get the in situ charging the battery without taking the deck off, without taking the tank apart at all, then basically I'll put it all together and I'll hope that it stays together without a hitch for a very long time. Anyway, that's as much as I'm going to say about the wiring, most likely, and this may be the only time I actually take or attempt to take the tank apart to this degree. Anything else I do, I'm probably just going to talk about the tank with it assembled or show pictures. Okay, so that completes it. I'm going to stop the recording.